So,
What are you doing?
officer, what's the reason for the stop?
I asked you first. What are you doing here?
Driving home. What did I do?
Out. Now. Hands up.
My hands are up. I'm a U.S. Marshal. Badge 2847, it's in my inside pocket.
Yeah? Everyone's got a badge these days.
Officer Brandon Collins had 8 years on the force and 12 complaints in his file when he made the worst decision of his career on a Tuesday afternoon in Columbus, Ohio. He saw a black sedan with temporary tags driving through a quiet neighborhood, and something in his mind clicked. The driver was not speeding. No traffic violations were happening, but Collins decided to follow the car anyway. 6 blocks later, he found his excuse and flipped on his lights. The man behind the wheel was U.S. Marshal Gary Williams, a decorated federal agent with 15 years of service. What happened next would destroy Collins's career, trigger federal investigations, and expose a pattern of behavior that should have been stopped years earlier. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Collins had a record that should have raised red flags throughout the department. 12 citizen complaints over 8 years, most involving traffic stops, and most involving black drivers. His supervisors had noticed some issues but never took serious action. A little extra training here, a verbal warning there, but nothing that actually changed his behavior. That failure of leadership was about to cost everyone dearly. It was 2:47 p.m. when Collins spotted the black sedan. The car was moving exactly at the speed limit through a middle-class area. Everything about the vehicle and its operation was legal, but Collins pulled in behind it and started following. He was looking for a reason, any reason, to justify what he had already decided to do. For 6 blocks, he tailed that sedan, waiting and watching. When the car made a right turn and the tire briefly touched the white line, Collins had his excuse. The lights went on, the stop was initiated, and a chain of events began that nobody could take back. Gary saw the flashing lights and felt that familiar sinking feeling. He had been in law enforcement long enough to recognize when something felt off about a stop. But he did exactly what he would tell anyone else to do. He pulled over safely, put the car in park, turned off the engine, and placed both hands on the steering wheel where they could be clearly seen. Collins approached the vehicle with his hand already resting on his weapon. His body camera was recording everything, though he seemed to have completely forgotten that fact. That footage would later become the evidence that buried him. Gary rolled down his window slowly, hands visible, calm, and compliant. He expected the standard request for license and registration. What he got instead told him everything he needed to know about why he had been pulled over. Collins's first question was not about the lane violation. It was not a request for documents. He demanded to know what Gary was doing in this neighborhood. The question hung in the air like an accusation. The implication was crystal clear and absolutely disgusting. Gary had dealt with difficult situations throughout his career. He had arrested dangerous fugitives and handled life-threatening confrontations, but being on the receiving end of this kind of stop was different. He stayed calm and explained that he was a federal agent. His credentials were in his jacket pocket. He asked permission to reach for them. Collins refused. Instead of allowing Gary to identify himself, Collins ordered him out of the vehicle immediately. This was Collins's second massive mistake, and the consequences were already piling up. Federal agents, especially U.S. Marshals, have specific legal protections during traffic stops. They must be allowed to identify themselves safely. Officers are trained on these protocols. Collins either never learned them properly or chose to ignore them completely. Gary stepped out of the car, moving slowly and keeping his hands visible. He kept his voice calm and respectful as he explained again that he was a federal agent and needed to retrieve his credentials to prove it. Collins responded by becoming more aggressive, raising his voice and positioning his hand closer to his weapon. A woman across the street heard the raised voices and looked out her window. What she saw concerned her immediately. The officer's body language was aggressive and confrontational. The driver was being cooperative and calm. Something about the whole scene felt wrong. She grabbed her phone and started recording. That decision to record would later prove crucial. Her video captured angles and moments that the body camera missed. It showed the full context of what was happening and how unnecessary Collins's aggression really was. Collins asked if there were weapons in the car. Gary answered truthfully that yes, there were firearms in the vehicle because he was a U.S. Marshal carrying out his duties. This answer should have prompted Collins to verify Gary's claims immediately. Instead, it seemed to make Collins more paranoid and hostile. Rather than calling dispatch to confirm Gary's identity, rather than simply letting him show his credentials, Collins made everything worse. He ordered Gary to the back of the vehicle and told him to place his hands on the trunk. Gary complied with every instruction while continuing to calmly explain who he was and where his identification could be found. More neighbors noticed the commotion. Windows opened. People stepped onto porches. 3 more phones came out to record. Collins was creating a public spectacle, and every second of it was being documented from multiple angles. Type badge in the comments if you think Collins should have just let Gary show his credentials. Collins finally called for backup, but the information he gave dispatch was completely false. He reported a suspicious individual claiming to be a federal agent who was refusing to cooperate. Anyone listening to the body camera audio could hear that this was a lie. Gary had been nothing but cooperative from the very first moment. 2 additional officers arrived within minutes. Glenn Foster and Rachel Nguyen pulled up, having no idea what kind of situation they were walking into. Collins immediately gave them his version of events, painting Gary as uncooperative and potentially dangerous. But when they looked at the scene, something did not add up. Nguyen was experienced enough to spot problems immediately. She asked Collins the obvious question. Had he allowed the man to show identification? Collins brushed off the question and said the suspect was being evasive. That answer did not satisfy Nguyen at all. Gary looked directly at Nguyen and stated his full name, badge number, and department affiliation. He told her exactly where his credentials were located and asked permission to retrieve them. His tone was professional and precise. This was clearly someone with law enforcement training. Nguyen glanced at Foster. The look they exchanged said everything. They both knew the stop had gone completely wrong. Nguyen pulled Collins aside and quietly suggested they let the man show his identification immediately. Collins refused, insisting he was in charge and they needed to follow his lead. This created a clear split among the officers present. Nguyen wanted no part of what was obviously becoming a disaster. Foster was newer and less certain, but even he could see the warning signs everywhere. If they were not careful, this would destroy all of their careers. Gary remained patient through all of this, though his frustration must have been enormous. Here was a federal law enforcement officer being treated like a criminal for absolutely no valid reason. His only apparent crime was driving while black in a neighborhood where Collins thought he did not belong. Collins made his next catastrophic decision. He announced he was going to search the vehicle. Gary immediately informed him that without probable cause or consent, such a search would be illegal. He explicitly stated he did not consent to any search of his vehicle. Collins ignored him and searched anyway. This was not just a violation of Gary's rights. Federal agents' vehicles often contain sensitive case files, evidence and materials related to ongoing investigations. Searching one without proper authority is potentially a federal crime. Collins had just crossed a line that would have serious consequences. He found Gary's badge and credentials in the jacket on the passenger seat, exactly where Gary had told him they would be multiple times. Collins pulled them out and stared at them. For a long moment, he just stood there, as the reality of what he had done started to sink in. He had illegally detained a U.S. Marshal. He had conducted an unlawful search. He had filed a false report with dispatch, and all of it was recorded on multiple cameras. His career was over, and somewhere in his mind, Collins had to know it. But instead of immediately apologizing and trying to salvage the situation, Collins made it worse. He examined the credentials as if they might be fake. He asked Gary why he had not shown them immediately, despite his own body camera proving he never gave Gary the chance. Every word out of his mouth just dug the hole deeper. Nguyen had seen enough. She walked over, looked at the credentials herself, and told Collins this needed to end right now. She got on her radio and asked dispatch to verify the badge number independently. Within the 30 seconds, dispatch confirmed that Gary Williams was an active U.S. Marshal in good standing. The crowd of neighbors had grown to about a dozen people. Many were recording. All were watching an officer's career implode in real time. What they witnessed was not just one bad cop having a bad day. They were seeing the result of a system that let officers like Collins operate with impunity for years until they finally went too far. Do you think body cameras make a difference? Let us know your thoughts. Collins handed the credentials back without offering any apology or explanation. He told Gary he was free to go, as if this was just a normal traffic stop that had reached its natural conclusion. No acknowledgement of what had happened. No recognition of the violations that had occurred, just a cold dismissal. But Gary did not get back in his car and drive away. He asked Collins for his name and badge number. Collins hesitated. Officers are legally required to provide this information when requested, but Collins clearly did not want to. That hesitation alone showed he understood how badly he had messed up. Gary wrote down everything: names, badge numbers, time, location, the sequence of events. He took photos of the scene with his phone. He was building a case, and Collins could only stand there and watch it happen. After Gary finally drove away, Nguyen confronted Collins directly. She wanted to know why he had pulled that man over in the first place. Collins claimed it was the improper lane change, but even that was questionable at best. She asked why he refused to let him show identification. Collins had no good answer for that. Foster was visibly shaken. He realized how close he had come to having his own career destroyed just by being associated with this stop. If he had blindly followed Collins's lead instead of letting Nguyen take charge, he might have been facing the same consequences Collins was about to face. The videos hit the internet within hours. The neighbor who started recording posted her footage to social media with a detailed explanation of what she witnessed. By midnight, it had hundreds of thousands of views. By morning, it had millions. Local news picked up the story immediately. By afternoon, it was national news. A decorated U.S. Marshal illegally detained and searched during a racially motivated traffic stop. The optics could not have been worse for the Columbus Police Department. The department's public affairs office went into crisis mode. They released a generic statement about being aware of the incident and conducting an investigation. The public was not satisfied with that response. Protesters began gathering outside police headquarters, demanding Collins's immediate firing. The U.S. Marshal Service released their own statement confirming that Deputy Marshal Gary Williams had been illegally detained during an unjustified traffic stop. They announced they were filing a formal complaint with the Department of Justice. That changed everything. Federal involvement meant this was no longer just a local police matter. The DOJ's Civil Rights Division opened an investigation into Collins specifically and into the Columbus Police Department's broader patterns. They wanted to know how an officer with 12 complaints was still on active duty. Collins was placed on administrative leave within 24 hours. The police union initially tried to defend him with a statement about officers making difficult split-second decisions. The backlash was immediate and fierce. The union quickly backed away from that position. The body camera footage was released after a Freedom of Information request. Watching it was damning. From the very first moment of contact, Collins's bias was obvious. His aggression was unprovoked. His refusal to allow Gary to identify himself was indefensible. The illegal search was captured in perfect detail. Everything that destroyed his career was right there in high definition. Legal experts who reviewed the footage were unanimous in their assessment. Collins had violated civil rights, conducted an illegal search, and filed false reports. Any single one of those could end a police career. All three together meant Collins was absolutely finished. The internal investigation moved with unusual speed, likely due to the intense public pressure and federal oversight. Investigators interviewed everyone present, reviewed all available footage, and examined Collins's entire employment history. What they found painted a disturbing picture. Those 12 previous complaints showed an undeniable pattern. 10 involved traffic stops of black drivers. Most occurred in predominantly white neighborhoods. The complaints described remarkably similar behavior in each case: aggressive approach, questions about what the person was doing in the area, searches without clear justification. The department had flagged some incidents for additional training. Collins had been counseled a few times, but he never faced real discipline. Supervisors failed to recognize or address the obvious pattern of behavior. That failure allowed Collins to continue until he finally targeted someone who could not be intimidated into silence. 3 weeks after the incident, the Columbus Police Department announced Collins's termination. The official statement cited multiple policy violations, including illegal detention, unlawful search, filing false reports, and conduct unbecoming an officer. The termination was immediate with no possibility of reinstatement. But that was not the end of Collins's problems. The local prosecutor's office announced they were reviewing the case for potential criminal charges. Violating civil rights under color of law is a federal crime. The illegal search could also carry criminal penalties. Collins's union could not protect him from federal prosecution. In fact, they quietly stopped defending him once criminal charges became likely. He was on his own now, facing the possibility of prison time for actions he took while wearing a badge. The Department of Justice expanded their investigation into a full pattern and practice review of the entire Columbus Police Department. They examined training protocols, complaint procedures, supervisory oversight, and disciplinary processes. How many other officers like Collins were out there operating without accountability? The city faced the possibility of federal oversight through a consent decree, which would place the department under court supervision for years. The financial costs would be enormous. The operational changes would be massive. All because one officer's prejudice and the system's failure to stop him. Have you or someone you know ever experienced something similar? The comments are a safe space to share. Gary gave one interview to a national news outlet. He was measured and professional, exactly what you would expect from someone in his position. He explained that he did not want to be the face of this story, but he felt obligated to speak out. If this could happen to a federal agent, what happened to ordinary citizens who did not have his resources or platform? He talked about the fear he felt during that stop, even as a trained law enforcement officer himself. The uncertainty of not knowing how far Collins would escalate things. The sick realization that his badge and years of service meant nothing to an officer who had already decided he was a threat based solely on the color of his skin. The interview resonated because Gary did not perform outrage or demand revenge. He simply explained what happened and why it mattered. He called for better training, meaningful oversight, and real consequences for officers who abuse their authority. His calm professionalism made the message even more powerful. Civil rights organizations used the case as a textbook example of why police reform was desperately needed. Here was a decorated federal agent treated like a criminal. If someone with that level of authority and training could be targeted, then nobody was truly safe from biased policing. The case also highlighted the critical importance of recording police interactions. Without the body camera footage and civilian videos, it would have been Collins's word against Gary's. The recordings made the truth undeniable and justice possible. 6 months after the incident, federal charges were filed against Collins. 3 counts: deprivation of rights under color of law, illegal search and seizure, and making false statements to investigators. Each count carried potential prison time. His trial was scheduled for the following year. The Columbus Police Department implemented sweeping changes in response to the federal investigation. New training programs on implicit bias and constitutional policing. Reformed complaint procedures with independent civilian oversight. Early warning systems designed to identify problematic patterns before they escalated. Monthly reviews of random body camera footage looking for concerning officer behavior. Were these changes sufficient? Only time would tell. Reform is not a single event, but an ongoing process. The real test would be whether the department's culture actually shifted, or if they were just going through motions to satisfy federal investigators. Gary returned to his regular duties with the U.S. Marshal Service. He did not seek ongoing media attention or try to become a public activist. He had a job to do, protecting the public and apprehending fugitives, and he continued doing it well. But his case had an impact far beyond his personal experience. Police departments across the country began using the incident in training programs. It became a case study in what not to do during a traffic stop. It demonstrated how quickly an officer's unchecked bias could escalate a routine interaction into a career-ending catastrophe with criminal consequences. Some officers complained that cases like this made their jobs harder, that they would be second-guessed for every decision. But most professional law enforcement officers understood the real lesson. Treat everyone with respect and dignity. Follow constitutional guidelines and your career will be fine. It was not complicated. The neighbor who first recorded the incident gave several interviews about why she started filming. She said the tone of the interaction immediately seemed wrong to her. The officer's level of aggression did not match the situation she was observing. Her instinct told her to document what was happening, and that decision helped ensure accountability was possible. Her actions sparked important conversations about citizen oversight and the role of bystanders during police interactions. Recording police activity is legal in virtually all circumstances, and videos from witnesses often provide crucial evidence that official body cameras might miss or that departments might be reluctant to release. Collins's trial took place 14 months after the initial traffic stop. The evidence against him was overwhelming and came from multiple sources. Body camera footage, witness videos, testimony from Nguyen and Foster, dispatch recordings, and Gary's own detailed account all told the same story. The defense attempted to argue that Collins made errors in judgment, but did not act with criminal intent. That argument collapsed when prosecutors presented the pattern of his previous complaints. This was clearly not a one-time mistake, but a pattern of behavior that had finally gone too far and been properly documented. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all 3 counts. Collins showed no emotion as the verdict was read, but his family members in the courtroom were devastated. The man who had spent 8 years as a police officer would now become a convicted felon. Sentencing came 2 months later. The judge acknowledged Collins's years of public service, but emphasized that his betrayal of the oath he took was too serious to overlook. 18 months in federal prison, 3 years of supervised release after that, and a permanent prohibition from working in any law enforcement capacity anywhere in the country. For someone who had built his entire identity around being a cop, this represented the complete destruction of his life as he knew it. His pension was gone, his career was over, his reputation was destroyed forever. All because he allowed his prejudices to override his training, his common sense, and the Constitution he swore to uphold. The Columbus Police Department settled a civil lawsuit with Gary for an undisclosed amount. The settlement included agreements for continued reform efforts and ongoing federal monitoring of the department. The city's taxpayers would ultimately foot the bill for one officer's misconduct and the department's years of failure to address his pattern of behavior. 3 supervisors who had reviewed Collins's previous complaints without taking meaningful action also faced discipline. 1 was demoted. 2 were reassigned to non-supervisory positions. The department was making it clear that failure to address problem officers would carry consequences going forward. If you have made it this far, you are part of the solution. Subscribe and share this story so others can learn from it. The broader impact of the case continued to unfold over the following years. Police reform legislation in Ohio included provisions inspired directly by what happened to Gary. New requirements for better tracking and analysis of complaints, mandatory early intervention programs for officers showing patterns of problems, stricter standards and better documentation requirements for traffic stops. Not every police misconduct case ends with this level of accountability. Many victims do not have the platform or resources that a federal agent has. Many incidents are not captured on camera from multiple angles. Many officers never face real consequences for their actions. That is exactly why this case mattered beyond just one bad traffic stop. It demonstrated that accountability was possible when there was clear evidence, sustained public pressure, and officials willing to act on both. It proved that wearing a badge does not place anyone above the law, and it showed that the system could work properly, even if it required a perfect storm of circumstances to make that happen. Gary never said he wanted to become a symbol or a test case for police reform. He was simply driving home from a work assignment when he got pulled over for no legitimate reason. But his experience became a teaching moment for the entire country about what policing should look like and what it absolutely should not tolerate. Years of dedicated service protecting the public, hunting dangerous fugitives, and upholding the law. And he still was not safe from being profiled and mistreated by a biased officer. That reality was uncomfortable for many people to accept, but accepting it was necessary for any real change to occur. The story of that traffic stop on a Tuesday afternoon in Columbus became more than just one incident between one bad cop and one federal agent. It became evidence of a systemic problem and a roadmap for how to address it. Document everything possible. Demand accountability consistently. Support meaningful reform efforts and never accept that this is just how things have to be. Officer Brandon Collins destroyed his own career the moment he decided to pull over someone based on assumptions and prejudice rather than actual evidence of wrongdoing. Every decision he made after that just made things progressively worse. He had multiple opportunities to correct course and chose not to take any of them. In the end, justice was served, but the whole situation should never have been necessary in the first place. Thank you for watching until the end. Make sure you are subscribed for more stories that matter. What was the most shocking part of this story for you?